Jayamudirayat. Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text number 5, 328.5. Monam sad asana jayaha. Stairyam prana jaya shanai. Pratyaharascha chendriyanam. Vishayan manasahradi. Monam sad asana jayaha. Stairyam prana jaya shanai. Pratyaharas chendriyanam. Vishayan manasahridi. Monam sad asana jayaha. Stairyam prana jaya shanai. Pratyahara chendriyanam. Vishayan manasahridi. Maunam shad asana jayaha. Dayam prana jayakshanai. Pratyahara chendriyanam. Vishayan manasahridi. Go ahead. Monam sad asana jayaha. Stairyam prana jayakshanai. Pratyahara chendriyanam. Vishayan manasahridi. Maunam, silence. Sat, good. Asana, yogic posture. Jayaha, controlling. Stairyam, steadiness. Prana jayaha, controlling the vital air. Shanai, gradually. Pratyahara, withdrawal. Cha, and indriyanam, of the senses. Vishayat, from the sense objects. Manasa, with the mind. Hridi, on the heart. Translation: one must observe silence, acquire steadiness by practice of different yogic postures, control the breathing of the vital air, withdraw the senses from sense objects, and thus concentrate the mind on the heart. Sounds pretty complicated. Purport: the yogic practices in general, and Hatha Yoga in particular, are not ends in themselves. They're means to the end of attaining steadiness. First, one must be able to sit properly, and then the mind and attention will become steady enough for practicing yoga. Gradually, one must control the circulation of vital air, and with such control, he will be able to withdraw the senses from sense objects. In the previous verse, it is stated that one must observe celibacy. The most important aspect of sense control is controlling sex life. That is called brahmacharya. By practicing the different sitting postures and controlling the vital air, one can control and restrain the senses from unrestricted sense enjoyment. Short purport, but it's the message is part of this overall theme. The overall theme is from a directive given in the very beginning, there's steps of application. The directive is, I'll read the directive in verse number 1. The personality of Godhead said, "My dear mother, O daughter of the king, now I shall explain to you the system of yoga, the object of which is to concentrate the mind. By practicing this system, one can become joyful and progressively advance towards the path of the absolute truth." Yoga Indriya Samyama, a phrase that Prabhupada referred to. The yoga process, which is what this chapter is discussing, at least initially, it's the objective is to come to the path of the absolute truth, or to come to the Bhagavan feature. That's the absolute truth in full. So prior to the absolute truth in full, there's a target, or the objective, and that's the super soul, because that's in the next verse. The super soul is not the be-all, end-all, but then there's procedures to help concentrate the mind. Concentrate the mind. Just this morning, I was listening to Prabhupada describe the Hatha Yoga system, and he would use that, maybe not how it's used in yoga studios, but the principle of asana and pranayama. The asanas and the pranayama are both, the Hatha Yoga system is meant to control the mind. So that's not the goal, but it's a necessity for performance of yoga. If you can't control the mind, you can't connect with the Supreme. So some persons may have a little difficulty controlling the mind. And of course, the ultimate shelter through the bhakti process is absorb the mind in the holy name, and absorb the mind in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and through sound vibration, transcendental sound vibration, the mind can become fixed. Some persons may have an allergy for fixing their mind on the Supreme, and therefore they like the indirect process, just controlling the mind. And so there are steps, or there's assisting features. There are many principles in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the description of bhakti, where there's direct bhakti, that's the 9 processes of devotional service, and then there's at least one list has, besides those 9, there's 21 additional items that assist attaining direct. And attaining direct isn't dependent upon the 21. The 21 is just to assist the 9. And one who becomes proficient in one or any combination of the 9 will, the gift will be given to them. It'll be bestowed upon them by the bhakti process itself, the other 21. Like truthfulness and cleanliness and austerity, and a follower of sadhana bhakti will naturally do these things. And one who has those 21, it makes it easier. It facilitates. here's a for example. A God brother yesterday sent me a little message. What Srila Prabhupada did and what our acharyas did and what the Bhagavatam in principle advocates is, like say Prahlad Maharaj, regardless of one's birth or any other material asset or detriment, one isn't made a candidate for bhakti or eliminated from being a candidate for bhakti. Just be a spirit soul. And that's everybody. And they're candidates for bhakti. However, because it's the age of Kali, very few people are in this category of the 21 beneficial. Basically, they're very similar to the items of goodness described in Bhagavad Gita. Characteristics of goodness, passion, and ignorance, or characteristics of those brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras, the duties and the qualities of. So the varnashram system is to help the bhakti system. The varnashram system is not an end unto itself, any more than these items listed in this verse are ends unto themselves. Controlling the mind, that's nice. And without controlling the mind, you can't advance in spiritual life. That is to say, if the mind is very agitated due to its flickering and unsteady nature, which means the senses are disturbing. See this, touch that, smell that, etc., etc. The 24 elements are coverings and demanding, as Rupa Goswami uses the word vegam, pushings and pullings that take the mind away from the goal, even if one has the goal in mind. Tries to have the goal in mind. The flickering nature of the mind it makes spiritual progress not only difficult, but like impossible. Unless and until the mind becomes controlled. So here's some indirect, and then there's the direct. The direct is the bhakti process itself. But one engages. So the person yesterday sent me a little message. Prabhupada and our previous acharyas, because it's the age of Kali, they dealt with people that are not qualified, and because they're were not spiritually qualified by influence of bad association, it was difficult. But Prabhupada had such purity, then persons who were unregulated, etc., etc., etc. I mean, that was his target audience, the hippies, or the unregulated and rebellious youth of that generation. But those persons were seeking something genuine, and he offered something genuine, and so they left that unregulated and became regulated. So this devotee was making the comment, now that we have some person practicing, then his argument was, or his position was, all the more importance of the varnashram system, such that from the very beginning there is proper training and orientation towards that which is favorable, as opposed to bhakti picking people up from the dustbin and dusting them off and making them Vaishnavas. But if persons are already, if they have these 21 qualifications, or as in this verse is saying, a controlled mind, then it's an asset. It's a very significant asset to progressing significantly on the bhakti path. And by that example in society, then encouraging others in the same way. It's a step in the direction of elevated society. That is to say, this devotee was arguing that practicing ISKCON devotees, it's not the varnashram system. What is important for persons that are not devotees, but it's unimportant for those who are devotees. His argument was it's very important for those who are devotees, so that an example can be set, and persons that have already some asset, to go further because they already have some asset. And that's very much the case in each of these. I was just preparing for this evening. Shivananda Sen and his son, it was Kavi Karnapur. And from the Kavi Karnapur's upbringing, when he was 16, he wrote his first book. And he wrote many, many books. It means he was already a very elevated, qualified person. And that very elevated, qualified person did very elevated, qualified things, etc., 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 etc. Not just born in a Brahmin family, that's one of the characteristics of many of the great acharyas, but Shivananda Sen was a kayasta. He was from a mercantile class. He wasn't, a Brahmana. He was just a very elevated Vaishnava. And so the point is, these principles that are being described, in one sense, they're a subset of the bhakti process, no problem. You're going to be a nice practicing sadhaka, then, like yesterday's verse, as Prabhupada's repeating again, brahmacharya, from the very get-go, brahmacharya, even grahastha brahmacharya, that is, they follow the standards of regulation in material life. And like this phrase, it's in the purport, sit properly. Maybe some of you have heard the recording. It's a recording of 61 Second Avenue. I found out where the recording came from because a devotee that was there for the recording was Nayana Baram. And that Nayana Baram had a habit of slouching. So he was kind of proud of the fact that when Prabhupada stopped chanting and said sharply, sit properly, he was addressing Nayana Baram because he was slouched against the altar. Prabhupada was over on a side. He was slouched, leaning against the altar. Sit properly. It's right here. So this is the yoga process, but it's also the bhakti process. And there's something about sit properly. If you don't sit properly, then it's hard to be attentive. Or if you sit properly, the spine is straight, and if the spine is straight, it does something to the nervous system and the sensitivities of the brain, and the awareness is strengthened, and as opposed to slouching, and then awareness is diminished. The nervous system doesn't act as it can and should, and commonly one may fall asleep. There's a devotee, I won't mention their name, but I had this little discussion with them about how they sit during japa retreats. I said, you're sitting like a sack of potatoes. And so it's hard for you to be attentive. You're chanting, you're here at the japa retreat, but I can see you were struggling. And they said, yes. So sit properly. So I'm just the points that are made in the yoga system or the hatha yoga system. We may not practice asanas, but those who are practicing asanas and pranayama. What's the purpose? Control the mind. And by controlling the senses, it assists in controlling the mind. Or the senses that are uncontrolled, unregulated and uncontrolled, the mind can't be peaceful. The mind can't be focused. So this and that together make for help concentrate the mind. But the concentrated mind isn't an end unto itself. That's a statement that's being made directly here. It assists one on the path of achieving the absolute truth, the path of the absolute truth, the path of Bhagavan. And it's nice. And if you don't do asanas, it's also nice. But sit properly. And take advantage of the mind, those things that help the mind become concentrated, as opposed to the mind that's distracted and therefore can't be concentrated. And to have the mind concentrated as opposed to distracted, it takes practice. And practice of what? The message is there in Bhagavad Gita. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one should bring it back under the control of the self. So practice and practice and practice and practice. Just this morning, I've heard this many times, but Bhaktisiddhanta is saying, to control the mind, first thing when you wake up, what are you supposed to do? Beat the mind with a shoe. How do you beat the mind with a shoe? It's metaphorical. And at night, before you take rest, beat the mind with a broomstick. What's a broomstick? What are you doing? Some person's not understanding metaphorically. They'd get their shoes and bang their head, and get a broomstick and put it by their bed and bang their head. That's not what it means. It's the mind, not the head. It's, by the principle is something that is like an animal. An animal understands a stick, and you beat the animal, or strike the animal with your stick, and you may have a fight on your hand if you do that. But then, if the person, the master of the dog is strong enough, the dog then may become submissive. And then when the owner of the dog or the commander of the dog says something, gives a command, the dog becomes obedient. It's a principle of helping to bring the mind to submission. And the purpose of the mind becoming submissive is to control it by the intelligence. And the purpose of directing the mind on the strength of intelligence, proper intelligence, is what is the intelligence and what the mind to go, to think of Krishna and not other things. So that's, the distracted mind can be corrected as, and there was this little saying, somebody was circulating a little saying that Prabhupada said even a dog can be trained to chant. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu trained a dog to chant. And then there's a little video of someone, a dog is in front of them. You don't see them, you see the dog. And they say in a rough voice, "Ram, Ram." And the dog said, "Ram, Ram." And many times over again, "Ram, Ram." So even you can train a dog to chant. Now, what's the consciousness of the dog? Are they chanting God's name? But make the sound vibration and That's one part of chanting. And then hearing is another part of chanting. The foundation of consciousness is the soul. The soul has coverings, gross and subtle bodies, and both the gross and subtle bodies need some kind of discipline or regulation to help more readily access the higher consciousness that's innate within the soul, as opposed to the three modes of material nature. Purushak Prakriti Stohi Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan, from chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita. The living entity becomes infected by the attempt to become the enjoyer of the modes of nature. Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan, trying to be the enjoyer of the three modes of material nature that's infecting the disease of material consciousness. And the antidote is, medicine. That is, restrain the mind from those things, but more importantly, to direct the mind, purify the mind by directing the mind towards something higher. So back to the main point, controlling the mind. The whole purpose of yoga, control the mind. And the control of the mind means directing the mind towards the Supreme. And refraining from certain unwanted things. That's what's being described. I read the verse again, see if there's some discussion. One must observe silence, acquire steadiness by practicing different yoga postures, control the breathing of the vital air, withdraw the senses from sense objects, and thus concentrate the mind on the heart. Concentrate the mind on the heart. That's where Supersoul is. It's where the individual soul and Supersoul is. But it helps those that don't understand soul, Supersoul, concentrate the mind on the heart. Than just yoga practitioners, the Western undisciplined, uneducated group of people that are learning something about meditation. Meditate, fix the mind by fixing the mind on the heart. Concentrate the mind on the heart. Because there's something there. Consciousness. Permeating and emanating throughout the entire body in the Supreme Consciousness. So, undisciplined, not shastrically guided, more specifically, not shastrically guided persons, they may like that type of meditation, fixing the mind on the heart. And if they can do, great. But to be able to do without these other elements in place, brahmacharya, for example, or overindulging the tongue in vibrating sounds that have nothing to do with spiritual sound vibration. Some people are very talkative. It's hard to fix the mind. Or eating anything, everything. So restrict the eating to quantity and types of foods. It's all part of, they're not ends, but they're means. It's a sadhana towards the sadhya, towards the goal. The indication here in this verse is fix the mind on the heart, and then within the heart, there's when the mind can be fixed on the heart, then there's further, turn the lens and make meditation on the heart more focused. The self and the Supreme Self. That's where that train is going. Then you have to start somewhere, so you start with these basic disciplines, yama niyama, the do's and the don'ts. I don't know how much, probably zip, when people conduct a yoga class, how much they start with yama niyama. Don't know, but I can imagine it's no mention at all. Or modest. But they're principles that are helpful in concentrating the mind. Ultimately concentrating the mind on the Supreme Soul, Paramatma, within. And then eventually leading to Bhagavan. Okay. Discussion. He's gesturing the microphone in your direction.
No. Do you have any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Maharaj mentioned foundation of consciousness is soul. I don't know if I heard that right.
Consciousness is?
Soul.
The
Soul.
seat of consciousness. The soul is both conscious and consciousness.
Conscious.
Yes.
So my question is, when we are chanting, our consciousness, we try to absorb our consciousness in the holy name. So the soul is observing that, the object of meditation, which is holy name.
Well,
So-
that's when the mind is focused. The answer is yes. When the mind is not focused, the answer is no.
And also, if mind is not clean, then the soul cannot.
Hear fully. They can hear on the material side, the auditory nerves are working. You hear a sound, but you don't hear the spiritual sound. You hear the material sound. This is Bhakti Siddhanta, but it's a fact.
So my question is, Guru Maharaj, so we are helping the soul to get absorbed in the holy name by chanting purely or pure consciousness. So as long as the consciousness has a lot of dirty things, the soul, because the soul cannot directly contact the consciousness because consciousness is material.
Yeah. So what's your point?
I'm trying to understand the process, how the soul and consciousness and holy name.
It's cleansing. You have a kitchen. And in your kitchen, you have a counter. And when you're cooking, the counter is fine, but there's stuff on the counter. And you have to clean the counter so that it's clean. So it's cleansing. Beneath the covering of consciousness is pure consciousness. And then there's the purification or the cleansing of consciousness, Chaita Darpana Marjanam.
Once the cleaning is complete,
That's very nice.
so the soul get unified with the holy name.
The covering becomes removed. Then, in that sense, the soul becomes purified. But the soul is pure. But there's coverings over, layers and layers of coverings. So that layers and layers of coverings become a. It's like, an object, looking out the window behind you, there's a tree. And at night you can't see the tree. But when the light is on, you can see the tree. It's not like the tree wasn't there and all of a sudden, voila, the tree is there. It's just you couldn't see it because of lack of light. Similarly,
Yes, Maharaj, that's very clear now.
the spiritual sound is like light. And with spiritual sound, then one can see things as they are. and without spiritual sound, one is seeing nothing because it's darkness, or misapprehending what something is as separate from Krishna something, and therefore up for grabs. I can try to be the possess and the enjoy that object if the Krishna light is dim or gone, darkness.
That's very clear now, Guru Maharaj, the cleaning the kitchen and the tree analogy. May I ask one more question,
Sure.
Guru Maharaj? Is there any difference between suppressing the mind and mind control?
What was the first option?
Suppressing.
Suppressing. Well, it's artificial. Mind control can be artificial. Mind control can be transcendental. Transcendental mind control is the mind becomes naturally, the healthy condition is the mind becomes attracted to the all attractive. The suppressing is, there's no sense of the all attractive, it's just diminishing, dialing down the attraction for the temporary. That's negation. And that's Mayavad. This world is false. Just give it a bad name. Trash it.
Thank you.
And then what's Brahman? Well, it's the absence of darkness, the absence of Maya. That's what Brahman is. Definition by negation. And so it's just word juggler. It's notional word jugglery without any realization. We discussed this, the difference between a Brahmavadi and a Mayavadi. So, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, when we think of Krishna, the obvious form that my mind always goes to is either the deities or his pastimes. But the fact that he's within us, the Paramatma feature of him, it always takes a backseat. How do I focus more on the Paramatma future because it's always within us?
How do you focus more on the which feature?
The Paramatma future, the Super Soul.
Follow the process. There's a process. You follow the process. Practice. Abhyasa yoga yoktena cetasa nanyagamino. There's a process, and you follow the process. You practice the process. Abhyasa. So what is? Then there are further descriptions of what are the elements of abhyasa or practice or cultivation. And there's scriptural texts that give that answer. Here's a common one that's in floating around ISKCON. It's not so much one that Prabhupada referred to, but Patanjali, the authority on yoga, indicates there's three elements of it. By definition, here's what abhyasa or practice is. 1, every day. 2, for a prolonged period of time. That means you're patient, you have confidence, and it's going to get you there. And then that's the third one. You have faith, it's going to get you there. That's sustained the practice over a long period of time. So that's abhyasa. You practice, one who strives by right means, abhyasa, one who strives by right means is assured of success. And it's not just your effort, it's your effort is being detected by Krishna and seeing, oh, he or she wants me. Then he helps them. He helps them by removing. It's not, we don't have the capacity to remove the obstacles. Krishna does. So it's a relationship with Krishna. But I may be thinking of the relationship feature more or less. I may just be thinking I'm going to get rid of this distraction. or my affinity for matter. But we can't do that. That's the negation thing. But then what's the positive besides that, on the other side of the negation thing? And so that understanding is where bhakti begins. Okay. Krishna, Krishna. Yeah, okay.
I have an online question from Shari. And Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, in reality, in this fast-paced life, we might not have time to do all these practices like Ashtanga Yoga.
Right.
What has 8 different features. Also, in 328.1, it says Ashtanga Yoga is part of Vaishnava practice of realization of Vishnu. As Maharaj mentioned, we can still achieve the goal of devotional service to the Supreme Lord through direct Bhakti Yoga, and also by practicing truthful non-violence, celibacy, silence, etc. Also by having higher taste by hearing from realized Guru, Sadhu, and reading the Shastra will help to control and clean the mind, intelligence and senses from sense objects. So, how do we incorporate Lord Kapila Deva's instructions of yoga practice to clean the mind except for sitting posture?
That's a long question. Could you summarize in a short phrase or
Yeah.
the maximum one sentence? What's she asking? Or she's making a statement, but what's she asking?
She's asking that how do we incorporate Lord Kapila Deva's instructions of yoga practice except for the like sitting posture? How do we incorporate?
Well, Kapila Dev is an incarnation, and that if you go to the chapter of Kapila Dev's instructions on devotional service, pure devotional service, you just can do you cultivate the pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Supposing one doesn't have that facility, then these other steps are similar to what's in Bhagavad Gita, the yoga ladder. But if one understands the destination, then you follow the sadhana of that destination. You follow the sadhana of pure devotional service. So what's the sadhana of pure devotional service? We did this already here, I think. There's Rupa Goswami gives a definition of what is sadhana. And the definition of sadhana is not just the do's and the don'ts, niyama, the things that are favorable things. That's a subset, but the essence is that the horse that pulls the cart is the awakening of ecstasy. He uses the word bhava in the definition of sadhana. And without that taste or that attraction, then it's not going to be, back to these 3 things, it's not going to be steady or extended over a period of time. It'll be intermittent. So back to her question, how do we incorporate? You follow the sadhana that's described by Kapila Dev in later chapters, where he's just describing pure devotional service. And supposing one says, oh, I can't do all that, then you have this other. So how you can incorporate, you follow the other. And with the understanding that I want what I'm not capable of right now. Over and over again, just saying the same thing in a different way. One must know the goal of life and how to achieve it. And what's the goal of life? And how to achieve it. That's attaining the state of prema bhakti. That's love for Krishna. That's the goal, and how to achieve it. There's a nice verse in Brahma's prayers that we spent a lot of time with while in Naperville. You can look it up. She can look it up. 10:14:3. In that 10:14:3, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms that verse expresses the goal of life and how to achieve it. So one does, if you do those things, you're all these other things are either folded within it, the benefits to derive from these other things. It's already in the means to achieve the goal of life. Then the rest of Kapila Dev's teachings, the more mature stage, the pure devotional service stage. And if you can't do that, you can go back some chapters where he's describing how to qualify and prepare oneself for that stage. Exactly how the first verse of this chapter begins. The path of the absolute truth.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, Prabhupada ki jai.